Listen, in my experience as a TRT coach, specifically focusing on the resolution of sexual dysfunction for men that are on TRT or HRT plus, estrogen is the single biggest driver of impaired erectile function on TRT. So in this video, I'm going to give you not only the lowest hanging fruit, but the deep, complex strategies on how to control estrogen on TRT so that you could maintain youthful erectile function, which is what we all want. And at the same time, I think you're going to find if you follow these strategies, the rest of your TRT protocol, including the side effects that you may be getting, will be substantially better. Look, before we get to ways to control estrogen on TRT for great erections, which is, again, what everybody wants, we should look into exactly why estrogen in high quantities on TRT causes erectile dysfunction. I want to make clear that I understand that there are a group of individuals out there on the web that either completely ignore estrogen, tell you to ignore estrogen, or proclaim that it doesn't need to be managed, and in some extreme cases, try to convince you that the more estrogen, the better. But I can tell you, both from a coaching standpoint, a real life experience standpoint, those ideas are quantifiably wrong. We do not have to look any further than the medical journals for the explanation of why estrogen causes erectile dysfunction on TRT for men. This paper is titled Estrogen and Phytoestrogen Predisposed to Erectile Dysfunction. Do ERA or estrogen receptor alpha and ERB or estrogen receptor beta in the cavernosum play a role? The cavernosum being a pair of sponge-like erectile tissue columns running along the penile shaft, as shown in this image here, that fill with blood to produce an erection. The question that this paper is posing is, do binding, so estrogen binding to estrogen receptor alpha and or estrogen receptor beta in the penis play a role in erectile dysfunction? Well, you should first know before we get into this that both estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta have been found in penile tissue. So estrogen itself does bind to receptors and have pronounced action in the penis. I will link this paper in the description so that you can go and read it, read the design of the study, the materials, the methods, the results, the conclusions, and the comments. But let me break down what the paper says. First major point. Estrogen itself doesn't just float around your body, activating estrogen receptors in the brain and modulating libido and modulating cardiac tissue and joint tissue, etc. It actually binds directly to estrogen receptors themselves in the penis, directly changing how erections work. The study in question confirms the existence of estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta in penile tissue. So here's what they did. They took male rabbits, and they gave them either high estrogen via estradiol, or they gave them phytoestrogens, which in this case are plant estrogens. Then they measured erectile signaling, smooth muscle response, and the primary takeaway of what they found is that given both estradiol as well as phytoestrogen, that the primary mechanism, one of the catalyst mechanisms of an erection, which is smooth muscle relaxation in the penis, could not happen. And it's important to break down why. Normally, the neurotransmitter acetylcholine fosters nitric oxide, which then causes the smooth muscles to relax, and then blood fills the penis and you have an erection. In that study, that relaxation response was blunted, meaning the penis couldn't actually relax enough to fill with blood. The second major finding is that nitric oxide itself, when given high estradiol or phytoestrogens, was impaired. I mean, this is the primary driver of erections in men. It's nitric oxide. They even tested a nitric oxide donor, nitroglycerin. They tested nerve signaling or allergic transmission. Both were significantly reduced. So here's the translation. Even when your body tries to produce an erection, if it's in the presence of elevated estradiol, your body will try to produce an erection. But overloads of estrogen basically make the penis less responsive to those signals. They blunt them. The other mechanism here is that anti-erection signals, like you've got anti-erection signals, chemicals in your body that prevent erections, one being norepinephrine, got stronger. So the anti-erection signals got stronger in the presence of this elevated estrogen. So basically what it's saying is that estrogen induced the anti-erection signal to be stronger, and it blunted the pro-erection signals. It did that via blunting cholinergic mediation of nitric oxide in the penis, which prevented smooth muscles from actually relaxing, which is going to prevent you from being able to achieve an erection. And it did it by increasing the norepinephrine-induced erectile inhibiting contraction. So to summarize, estrogen mediates erections strongly for men that are on TRT in the direction of inhibiting them via both neurotransmitter mediated mechanisms and, of course, smooth muscle in the cavernosum mediated mechanisms. Just to be clear, if folks are confused about mechanisms by which estradiol inhibits erections, I've just given you some of the primary ones. So that said, let's talk about the 5 best ways on TRT to control that hormone so that is in your optimal range, so that you're not inhibiting erections from the neurotransmitter nitric oxide smooth muscle point of view, and so that you're not producing loads of anti-erectile chemicals that block you from having an erection in the first place. All right, number 1, the lowest hanging fruit on this, and this is the strategy that I have refined over the years that works with coaching clients, is situate a TRT protocol, whether cypionate, enanthate, test prop, or testosterone cream, that lands the estradiol at around 20 picograms per milliliter. Now, this is usually going to be lower end dosing for folks on the long ester scale, 100 to 130 milligrams with minimal HCG. Regarding test prop, 15 to 25 milligrams a day. Regarding test enanthate, same thing, 100 milligrams to 130 milligrams a week. And with test cream, it's like 5 to 6 clicks of the 100 milligram cream on the scrotum in the morning with minimal HCG. I'm talking about 50 to 150 IU of HCG a day. Now, estradiol at 20 is not necessarily the best place to be because usually you need estrogen a little bit higher via its role in the brain on facilitating libido. So estrogen isn't entirely bad, of course. We just can't have it in these excessive quantities, which inhibit erections. If you have situated a protocol and you're running the labs and you have the E2 down to around 20, then all you really need to do is make a careful decision on which modality of testosterone in a minute quantity to add to your protocol to push the estrogen up into the libido-friendly zone where erections still exist and estrogen isn't crowding out your capacity to get erections. Usually that's 27, 30, 35. Rarely you'll see cases where guys can go to 40 or 45 picograms per milliliter of estradiol, but that's essentially the range. Listen, as some of you guys know, but if some of you didn't, I am a coach on TRT. All I do is help men fix libido, erection, sensation, and climax problems and permanently dial people in on testosterone replacement therapy. And every so often, but not very often at all, I open up an intake window for coaching where prices are slashed significantly and the longer term, very necessary coaching programs, especially to fix sexual dysfunction, become perfectly within your budget. I've just opened up the April intake TRT coaching window. It has started officially today, the 3rd of April, 2026, and will run until with each program 6 to 8 slots are filled. This applies to the TRT Sexual Function Protocol Blueprint, the single session consult with me, where I'll provide 3 to 5 action routes on a document online for you to go and execute to fix your TRT protocol, the 3-month TRT Sexual Function Restoration Intensive, which is an ongoing one-on-one coaching program with me, as well as the 6-month Advanced TRT Sexual Function Restoration Program. Once these slots are filled, the April intake TRT coaching window will close. The links to book me are down in the description of this video. It is a 2-minute process to book, and once you are booked, I will personally reach out to you to set up the fact-finding call and start immediately. Number 2, the use of exogenous DHT or dihydrotestosterone, preferably in a transdermal format, on the penile tissue itself or on the scrotum. What this does is prevent estrogen from having that catastrophic chemical effect on the blocking of the smooth muscle relaxation via norepinephrine and, of course, the inhibition of cholinergic and nitric oxide firing. It counters the negative NO consequences of elevated estradiol by improving nitrogen function in the penis, particularly in the cavernosum. And I don't suggest when you use exogenous DHT either on the shaft or on the scrotum that you stay with consistently elevated estradiol. But if estradiol is a little bit above your range and you're not interested in lowering because you don't want to, be less anabolic or you feel good otherwise, this is where exogenous DHT comes in and actually acts at the tissue level, the sex organ level, to block some of that estrogen activity and restore erections. You will often see people using Andractum, which is a 2.5 or so percent DHT gel. That works for some people, and then otherwise, as I've described on source lists, you can get high quality, high potency DHT in an oil base. The third best way to control estrogen on TRT is to use once weekly dosing. I'm a fan of once weekly dosing of either Arimidex or Aromasin. Now, doses run the gamut here, but it is best to start at the lowest possible dose, which for practical purposes is 0.125 milligrams of anastrozole per week and 6.25 milligrams of Aromasin per week. You definitely don't want to jump the gun on Aromasin or Arimidex. Like after the first week goes by and you have some sort of response, you want to measure the serum estradiol both at the peak of those drugs' half-life as well as the ultimate trough of those drugs, which in this case would be between the 3 and 7 day mark. You can measure it at the 2 day mark, the peak, the 3 day mark where it starts troughing, and also the 7 day mark to see at your ultimate trough of the drug's half-life, terminal life in that case, where exactly estradiol is. That will govern and influence how you should dose Arimidex or Aromasin moving forward. The fourth best way to control estrogen on TRT is 1 to 2x weekly dosing of a DHT-derived compound, which is also an anabolic, which we recently talked about, called Primobolan. Primobolan converts to an intermediary chemical, which acts as an aromatase inhibitor, but with not quite the affinity in terms of binding as Arimidex or Aromasin. I mean, those are pharmaceutical-grade aromatase inhibitors, whereas Primobolan is a DHT-derived compound, which provides anabolism but also blocks estradiol. As I described in the Primobolan on TRT video, which you should definitely have a watch, and I will throw it on the screen here. It was recently published on our channel. You want not to run the 1:1 ratio because that usually crushes estrogen a little too much, inhibits aromatase in the brain, reduces libido, and can even cause erectile dysfunction if you block estrogen too potently. 1 to 2x weekly dosing of Primobolan is usually the best way. Every 3.5 days is probably the best way of those two ways. And then again, some folks are going to have to microdose 5 to 10 milligrams small doses of Primobolan on top of the TRT protocol to get the estrogen in the favorable range of about 30 picograms per milliliter. So again, estrogen isn't causing you to have an anti-erectile response via norepinephrine and the blocking of the relaxing of the smooth muscles. And of course, the penis is allowed through cholinergic and nitric oxide transmission fill up with blood and have a proper erectile response. Now, the last best way to control estrogen on TRT is to moderately dose test and take Proviron in 25 milligrams a day on top of that. Proviron will lower estradiol and cause a degree of lowered estrogen-like effects via its potent DHT-like effect at the receptor, as well as its inhibition of the aromatase enzyme to a mild extent. This is where it gets a little tricky for people because by moderate, I mean not low doses of TRT and not high doses of TRT, somewhere in the middle. So with cypionate and you're talking about 130, 140 a week. Preferably doing daily injections so that you can prevent estrogen from peaking upon like a bolus injection. With testosterone propionate, you're looking at the 25 to 35 milligram a day range. Again, this is all dependent on how you respond to these agents. Some people go excessively supraphysiologic on anything above 25 milligrams a day of prop, but these are generalities. And of course, with cream, I mean, cream tends to aromatize a lot less generally. But if on the 200 milligram cream, 4 or more clicks per day, people tend to over aromatize there, but not a ton. So in those cases, 25 milligrams Proviron a day on top of those testosterone doses are what allow you to have both a powerful DHT signal and reduce the estrogen enough into the sex-friendly zone where estrogen isn't causing inhibition of the erectile function. So the last thing that I want to mention here is that there are a lot of other suggestions, mostly regarding supplements to lower estradiol, like calcium D-Glucarate, diindolylmethane, zinc, like compounds like chrysin. And generally speaking, these are suboptimal ways to lower estrogen. Calcium D-Glucarate, as an example, does not meaningfully lower estrogen. It just temporarily, and I mean very temporarily, speeds up estrogen excretion. Diindolylmethane does not really modify estradiol itself, more so other estrogens, and you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that can dial in estrogen with just taking DIM. Zinc, on the other hand, can meaningfully inhibit aromatase and meaningfully lower estradiol, but it is harder to dial in, right? It's easy to overshoot it because it's something that you take daily. People are taking 50 milligrams a day, and then erections come back suddenly for 2 or 3 days, and then on the ensuing 3 or 4 days, you've got low estrogen-induced libido reduction, and then you've overshot. It is important to understand the critical principle of controlling estrogen, however you do it, whether naturally via protocol or with otherwise compounds on TRT, given that there is a reference range for estradiol for males. Whether we are on TRT with elevated androgens or not, that reference range unfortunately still applies. The idea of a ratio of testosterone to estrogen making it tolerable for more estrogen because you have higher testosterone does not scale upward. I have proven that in coaching. The literature we've gone over via estrogen receptors in the penis and their action proves that as well. And if you are actually interested specifically in dialing the erectile function element of TRT, both DHT being in adequate quantities and estrogen being in your right window is the salient dynamic to look at. Okay, as I discussed briefly earlier in the video, we are now opening the April intake TRT coaching window. It has just officially started for each of the coaching programs, including the single session consult. There are 6 to 8 slots open for each of them. Coaching has undergone a massive price reduction. So you'll see the old prices or the original prices, which they'll go back to, crossed out. And then the April intake window price reduction prices displayed on each of the coaching programs. You are saving thousands of dollars on the 3-month, the 6-month, and even the PFS recovery. This is a limited intake window. When I fill the 6 to 8 slots that are open, I'm closing this window. There may be windows down the line, but we're only doing this until we fill these slots. If you've tried everything on TRT and erections, libido, sensation, climax, or otherwise are still failing you and you are frustrated, book coaching with me. I am a specialist. This is all I spend my time on, and we will get it resolved. If you're unsure about it, send me an email at ryan@livecortex.com. Discuss with me your situation, and let's talk about if you're a fit or not. Go to livecortex.com, go to the coaching page as demonstrated here. You can even at the top hit the start coaching now. It's going to take you directly down to the coaching packages, and then you hit any one of these buttons to start coaching and book. The moment you book, we're on the fact-finding call within a day or two, and we begin. I do not know how quickly the 6 to 8 slots per coaching program will fill, but they usually fill relatively quickly, so keep that in mind. They will be closed once filled and back to original price. All right, my brothers and Tess, it's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Thank you so much for listening. Like the video. This makes a huge difference to us putting this information out there to the internet where people desperately need strategy on dialing in TRT. Sub to the channel if anything that I said resonated with you. This is the channel that breaks down every facet of TRT, ranging from sexual function to energy to anabolism to side effects to performance to general well-being. That is all we talk about on this channel. Love to have you on board. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on, enjoy the rest of your day. And look, I've done plenty of other content on estrogen. In fact, there's one that I'd really like you to watch next so that you can get the complete picture on estrogen's role on TRT, specifically related to erectile dysfunction. I'll put the video on the screen. You can go click through it and watch it, and have a great one. Talk to you soon.